Welcome to the Leading Movement Health Series. I'm your host, Phil Wagner, founder and CEO of Sparta Science. Now, today's guest is unique, Mitch Haniger. Mitch is a professional baseball player and outfielder for the San Francisco Giants. He was drafted in the first round in 2012 and has played for 3 different teams, including being an all-star in 2018. And Mitch is unique. He's sustained and overcome a range of different injuries across different teams. And this episode is different because a lot of times we talk about leadership with executives from organizations. But leadership, one of the key principles is setting the example. And it begins and ends with yourself as an organization. Managing yourself, being your own advocate, your own coach, your own trainer. And probably the best example of an individual organization being an enterprise is a professional athlete. So I'm super excited to have Mitch on the show. Welcome, Mitch.
Thank you. Yeah, I'm glad to be on, Phil. I love talking with you and picking your brain.
Yeah, so Mitch and I have a unique relationship. You know, we started together as I was training him as a professional baseball player, but it's really evolved into learning from each other, and you know, it's something that I highly value personally. And Mitch, talk a little bit about, you know, why health is so important to your organization, which is the organization of Mitch Haniger. That's been the constant, right? It's you're the organization. How important has health been, particularly movement health?
I mean, it's everything. Being a professional athlete, it's all about movement. And, you know, like you said, I've experienced a lot of injuries over my career, and I've had to look at them and always look at them in a positive light and see what I can do when I've gotten injured. Kind of have my checklist of, okay, these are the things I can't do, and these are things I can do in order to come back as strong or even better. And I've had some injuries where I've come back even stronger. And I think it's because I've had that mindset that you've taught me. And, you know, especially I've had multiple different injuries. I've had an elbow injury one year, and coming back from it, the second game back, I had a hamstring injury. It was just because early on in my career, I was 22 years old. I didn't really understand what it was like to be hurt and miss a lot of time. So I wasn't sprinting a lot, and some of those things get neglected in rehab. So now suffering from an ulnar fracture, and I'm like, okay, when's the earliest I can start sprinting so that my legs are not only strong when I get back on the field, but hopefully even in a better spot than they were when I had my arm fracture.
Yeah, I think that's the one of the great things I've seen you learn and even teach me, that movement health truly is, you know, a global concept, right? And if you hurt one certain area, you mentioned the elbow, it doesn't preclude you from doing other things while that injury is, you know, recovering and improving, right? So to your point, you had that elbow injury coming back, you know, there was a sprinting injury, but certainly towards the middle and tail end of the elbow injury, there could have been sprinting to prepare to return. And I love that analogy you use of a checklist, right? Something happens, setback, you're like, okay, what can I do? That's where your mind goes right away.
Right. Yeah. And I think, that's, for me, it's more mentally than it is physically, but it's they go hand in hand from what I found with my health. It's like when I'm moving a lot, this is one thing why being a professional athlete, your body's everything. So you need to take care of your body. So when you rely on it to move in certain ways and get stronger and faster, it responds well. But also, you know, when I'm done playing, I want to move well the rest of my life. I still want to have an active life with my daughter, with my, you know, future kids to come, and my wife, and be able to move, because that makes me mentally happy as well. So when I had this fracture, I was like, okay, this sucks. And obviously you have some negative thoughts come in, but then I kind of tried to switch it as fast as possible to, man, of all the rehabs I had, this might be one of the easiest ones. Cause like you said, I can run, jump, even hit with my other hand. There's so many things I can do. And for me, that just keeps my mind active. And also I know, you know, it's only going to help my performance when I get back on the field.
Yeah. And I think that's important when leaders, you know, that are in charge of organizations, it's so easy to put limits. We can't do this. I can't do that. Right. But there are a lot more things you can do. Right. And as you talk about health and movement health, one of the things that keeps coming up is mental, right? It helps your mentality.
Absolutely.
To have that.
I mean, you just know, I think it's like, it's science now that said if you do cardio for 15, 20 minutes a day, and, you know, I think for the general population, doing cardio is amazing, but I don't, other than my sprint work and stuff like that, a fast-paced lift, I'm not doing a whole lot of cardio. But that just shows you that they say that doing that little amount of cardio every day just will improve your mental and physical health. So they're so intertwined. And, you know, I found my happiest times are when I can do both. And some of the darkest times are when you're really limited and can't do much physically.
Yeah, and it seems to be what you're saying too, is it almost gives you a sense of control when
Definitely.
things you can't control, like an injury, happen, right? I mean, you can't control a 95-mile-an-hour fastball hitting your arm, right, and causing
Right.
a fracture. But what you can control is how you respond and going through that checklist.
Definitely. Yeah, I think it's been very important. And yeah, in order to tackle rehabs and come back stronger, I found that this is the best way to think about it and approach it.
And I think the other thing that's been interesting, for me to observe, is how much you've latched on to the other side of it, which is the recovery piece, right? Obviously, you train hard. You guys play 160 games without playoffs, without spring training. It's a long season. The recovery piece is important both, physically, but also cognitively. Talk a little bit about, how you're kind of seeing the future of movement health, particularly when it comes to recovery.
I think it's ever growing and crazy. I mean, there's so many new things out there. And I think, the three biggest things are, your diet, sleep, and then any sort of recovery modalities you can add in there on top of those two things are extremely helpful. But I mean, I would also throw in some lesser valued ones, or like sunlight and breath work. Just ways to get your body's internal clock operating on circadian rhythm, making sure you're going to sleep at the right time. So your body can recover, your mind can recover. And then breath work to relax. For me, I feel like I'm more on the higher end strung type of personality. So doing some breathing stuff has been extremely helpful. And then over the years, I've gotten into, PMF therapy. Back when we were training at Sparta, they had one and I found great results from it. So I purchased one of those. Red light therapy, the float tank, sauna, all those four things are a huge staple in my recovery. And with the pulse and red light, I try to do as much as possible. And, I wish I had a float tank here because I would use it daily at my house or at the field, but unfortunately we don't. So I try to get there every week or two. And, man, I found that those things are a game changer, and it kind of sets me apart from some other guys in terms of recovery. And I also feel that at me as an athlete, I want to push myself to the limit. So I know that I have to do extra on the recovery end. If I wasn't really going full throttle, and you might not need all the extra stuff, but, this game's real tough, and it's always been a challenge for me. So I got to get all the best out of my ability I can, get the most out of everything I have.
Yeah, it's interesting as you talk, obviously the demands physically, it's a big part of your job. And the way I kind of think about it when I'm hearing you is, okay, if my demands are high physically, I have to also almost have a similar ratio of my recovery focus, right?
Exactly. I mean, yeah, if you're going out and you're drinking and not getting great sleep, you're bound to break. And I think also too, doing these things give me sort of a mental edge, because I know that I'm putting the work in on the field as well as off the field, and making sure, my mind and body are recovering in order to push myself the next day. And, as you get older as an athlete, you've had some bumps, bruises, and surgeries, and it just requires a little more attention. I still feel like I'm as good as athlete as ever, even better than prior to having my surgeries, but it's just a little bit more extra work, and you have to welcome that and always find ways to improve.
Yeah, and I think we talked about that quite a bit, you and I think how your training allows you to have this much greater longevity in the game than others that may not train. That you see players sometimes that don't have a training movement health background that may peak early, and then all of a sudden they're completely absent from the game. They don't have that longevity.
Yeah, I think it's common, unfortunately. And I think it's just a testament of how great the athletes are coming tomorrow. Like the athletes coming up are just, they're polished, they're working hard. They're always coming for your job. And this is such a competitive sport, and all sports are, at the major league level and the professional level. So if you're not continually getting better, you're just going to fall off.
I love it. Yeah. So I think, for me, I always kind of like to sum up, some great take home points for leaders and folks listening in. And for me, the biggest one is that mentality, having that positive mentality through setbacks. And the second one, which is related, is one of the ways you can actually create that positive mentality is something you've done, is like, okay, this happened. What can I do? What's my checklist of what can I do in order to kind of safely prepare for whenever your return is. And I think the third one, is with your physical load that's required to be a professional athlete, you're very cognizant that your recovery time and commitment has to match that. right? They can't, and
Definitely.
I think for everybody, if you have a lower level of physical activity, your recovery needs are probably less. But it's something always kind of, I guess, be aware of that ratio.
Absolutely. Yeah. I think it all depends on, what you're doing and what your body's requiring of you after. And I think for everyone, it's a little bit different. And I think also too, for positions and, especially in my game, the position aspect is much different. A catcher might need much more than an infielder, or, pitcher and a position player is completely different.
Yeah.
So some people are like, wow, you do a lot. And I'm like, yeah, man, I'm playing the outfield. We run a lot in the outfield. I'm sprinting a lot. So for me, I feel like I want to put in just as much work, after the game, doing my recovery stuff so that I can do it again tomorrow and feel confident and have my body feel good.
Yeah. Especially with the new game clocks.
Yeah. It's a lot quicker.
Yeah. Well, that's great, Mitch. Thanks for joining us today.
Yeah, of course. Thank you for having me. I really appreciate it, Phil.